we're alive at an unprecedented time. No other generation has had the internet, right? And we can use it, right? And so I feel that intelligent people should use it and to their advantage, right? And so, how can I help more people? Well, I can help. I could start a company, and then maybe I'll have some users, and I can help those users. But I took a step back and I was like, how can I help the most amount of people?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you may be listening, and welcome to Latitude, the 43 North podcast. I'm your host, Nate Benson, Director of Media and Public Relations here at 43 North, and we've got a great show for you this week. We have a local guy who's doing great things in New York City, Silicon Valley, and across the world. We've got Kevin Siskar, the Managing Director of the Founders Institute. You may have seen in the press lately that the Founders Institute is opening a Buffalo branch very soon in 2019. So we had Kevin on the show this week to talk about everything Founders Institute and how Buffalo startups can take advantage of a really great program. So I'm not going to waste any more time setting this up, and let's jump into this week's episode with Kevin Siskar. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Nate?
For those who don't know you, give us the quick pitch of who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Kevin Siskar. I'm the Managing Director of Founders Institute in New York City. We are a global startup accelerator headquartered in Silicon Valley, and we basically help pre-seed founders. So those are someone as early as I have an idea, all the way up to maybe I have 100,000 revenue. Really grow, scale, and launch their company.
But you've got roots locally, don't you?
Yeah. So born and raised Buffalo kid. Grew up a suffering Bills fan and excited Sabres fan back in the 2006, 2007 run, but moved to New York a few years ago, and I'm actually now trying to bring Founders Institute back to Buffalo as well.
And we'll get to that in a minute. But when you were in Buffalo, you were a volunteer fireman too, huh?
Yeah. So actually, a long family of volunteer firemen in Swarmville, New York. And so I was a volunteer fireman for 8 years. I worked my way up to lieutenant. It was a great experience overall. Actually, didn't really realize it at the time because I joined when I was 16 because my best friend at the time, his dad was the chief, and we'd be hanging out, and my best friend had joined, and so the tones would go off, and he would just leave, and I was like, well, now I'm like stuck here like hanging out by myself till everyone gets back. So I ended up joining as well. My grandfather, my cousin, and all three brothers joined, and friends joined, and it was an amazing experience. It was kind of I know it's cliche, but like a kindred brotherhood that was like a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I'm really grateful for it. But it actually taught me a lot about business, and I didn't realize that, honestly, until years later, because you would sit in meetings, and you'd adhere to Robert's Rules of Order, and you'd go through a typical board structure, and all these things that when you get to like a Series A company, and later need those skills. I learned them kind of inadvertently as a teenager, I guess.
Yeah. Having been a news guy, I spent a lot of time working overnights, covering a lot of the fires volunteer crews would go to. So I certainly have tons of respect for, especially the volunteer guys. All firemen have my respect, but the volunteer guys, separating themselves from their families for little to no compensation, and it's a real true service to the communities, especially in Western New York. There's lots of volunteer companies in Western New York.
Yeah, it's a great service. Obviously, living down in New York now, NYPD, everyone's paid, but I think most places around the country, these people are volunteering, and they'll go into a burning building and they'll save someone's life. So it's I commend all of them, and it's definitely an impressive feat for those that can do it long term.
So. How'd you get from Buffalo to New York City managing the Founders Institute? What was that journey like?
Yeah, sure. So I'll take it back a little bit. So I went to the University of Buffalo. I got my degree in cognitive neuroscience, and then I minored in philosophy. So what do you do with that?
So obviously you're in business, of course.
Yeah, so what do you do with that? But at the time, I thought getting a degree in neuroscience, I thought it was annoying and kind of inefficient that if you cured cancer, it would take 2 years to get peer-reviewed and put in a print journal before I could read about it, right? And maybe I could iterate on that science, so if the feedback loop is always 2 years, like we're never going to advance society, right? So I was like, well, social networks are new, Facebook's kind of new, right? Why don't we just make a social network for scientists and you can get peer-reviewed and publish your work online? So I have this idea. I'm dropping flyers around campus. I'm telling everyone about my idea, and I make all the mistakes that I see first-time founders make. And so, I'm telling people, and I finally, my grandfather goes, I know someone who gives people money for their ideas. You gotta talk to him. Mm-hmm. So I write this guy an email. It's the worst email of my life.
Probably lengthy, and
it's lengthy, but it's just one giant messed up, mashed together paragraph with grammatical errors. And I pitched that idea and like 3 other ideas, and it was brutal. It was brutal. So I get a polite email back basically saying, hey, when you have a product in market, come talk to me. Check out these resources. Very helpful. But that person was Chris Sacca. And so some people may not know, but he's basically, as of late, the most successful angel investor of all time. He was largest investor in Twitter, Uber. He was in Instagram, Flickr. But he's from Lockport, New York. And I grew up in Clarence, so down the street a ways. And that was the first time in my life where I was like, well, whoa, like, what is this? Like, there's not only am I like, I have this crazy idea, but also there's other people like me that have crazy ideas. And then there's these people that will support them and help them grow. And like, this just sounds like an amazing community. And so I started nerding out. I started reading every sort of business, venture capital textbook I could find, and started plugging myself in. It's funny how there's ways to plug in. I plugged in to Silicon Valley via Twitter before I ever left Buffalo and moved to New York.
Well, I mean, just the internet allowed that access of information more so than ever. And we've had some folks who built companies in the 90s, on this podcast, and they continue to say like there was no access to anything, even 20 years ago. So like the sheer fact 5 years ago, you could just simply go on Twitter and connect with successful entrepreneurs is we take that for granted.
Yeah, and I mean at the time, and actually I just brought this full circle recently. DigitalOcean is this multi-$100-million company in New York City that does hosting for websites. It's like Amazon Web Services. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking around the University of Buffalo listening to This Week in Startups, which was Jason Calacanis' podcast. And this guy called in and was like, hey, I'm thinking about quitting my job. Like, it's this thing. It's a hosting platform. And the guy was Mitch. His name is Mitch. And so I don't know why that stuck with me. It was just the way he was asking the questions. I always remembered that, Jason just ripped his idea apart, just told him he should quit his job, jump in, and then actually about a few months ago, I actually was talking to someone at DigitalOcean. They recommended a mentor, and Mitch came in and mentored, and fast forward, 10 years later, I went from listening to a guy calling in on a podcast. He then goes and makes a multi-$100-million company, and then I get connected with them. So it's amazing how close everyone in the tech and startup industry is, not just in Buffalo but across the country.
So Founders Institute, you're looking to bring that to Buffalo. How did you get started with Founders Institute, and how did you get up to the managing director position? And what do you do? What are you looking at on a day-to-day basis there?
Yeah, sure. So I knew basically from that point in that story earlier that I wanted to work with startups. So moved to New York in 2012. I joined Founder Institute, started a company, graduated Founder Institute. I was still working my job at the time. I hadn't quit and gone full-time on the startup yet. I was working in advertising and ad tech. But at the same time I was working in ad tech, the ad tech company went from, I was employee 180, went up to over 400. Whole company's getting flown to Miami. I got to see everything scale. And the best part about that is my boss was the first ever hire. So any question I ever had about how this company was built, grew, scaled, I could just go ask John Bronco, which was amazing. And then for the last year there, I watched it go back down from 400 to 200. The executive board would get fired. And so that was like a later stage, Series B, Series C, Series D sort of venture capital startup ride in itself. And then I was working on my own company on the side. And so during those 3 years, I essentially stayed close. It's funny how like little things you do just sort of have long tail effects, right? So I was a grad, and I would just once a month would text all the other grads and say, let's go grab beers. So like without realizing it, I became the alumni guy. Mm-hmm. And then when they needed a new director, they're like, "Oh, who should that be?" "Oh, Kevin texts everyone already every month. Maybe Kevin will do it." And so I became the director, a co-director at the time, mainly through just being sociable and keeping everyone connected.
Now, Founders Institute, not just a New York City thing, right? This is a global network.
Yeah, so we're headquartered in Silicon Valley. I run the New York City chapter. We have about 200 chapters around the world. And so I've been doing it about 3 years. I've helped create about 115 technology companies now. And I've worked with probably hundreds or thousands of founders at this point.
And we'll get into in just a minute why startups should come through Founders Institute. Why is Founders Institute coming to Buffalo?
Yeah, sure. So the reality is I left, right? And so back in the day, there wasn't the sort of startup opportunity here. And I've been paying attention to it since then, right? I remember meeting with Dan Magniszewski in the back of the Buffalo News. And he's like, "Oh, I have this idea for like a car auction app." And that was it, right? It was basically Dan was the ecosystem. Steve Poland, Coffee Club, there was a few other people back in the day, right? And it's grown a lot since then. There's a lot of support in the local ecosystem. Podcasts like this, 43 North, Dig is here now. People can come plug in, get in, free co-working spaces. I think also the Ignite Buffalo thing is great. I love that even the people like Oxford Pennant, for example, great local business building in a globally scalable way. I see Oxford Pennant, their pennants all over New York. They're in all the WeWorks, and so there's opportunities here to really scale, and the ecosystem, I think, is ready to support it.
So that being said, what does Founders Institute offer startups that they can take advantage of?
Yeah, sure. So to your point earlier, right, you talked to guys from the old days of the internet, right, and there just wasn't any resources. You just had to figure it out, right? And so first-time founders, even sometimes second-time founders, make mistakes. And they make a lot of common mistakes, right? And so the Founders Institute's goal is to really address that and prevent first-time, second-time, sometimes even third-time founders from tripping up on the common tropes that can take you out, right? And so it's a 14-week program where we cover everything from vision to revenue models to branding to getting incorporated the right way so you can hire people properly and issue equity correctly, product development, fundraising, bootstrapping. And we do that through a combination of a few things. You have a curriculum coming out of Silicon Valley that's about 20 to 30 hours a week of work, right? And it's not like B school where you're just like learning stuff in a textbook. It's like you're building your company. So for the legal assignment, you're going to a lawyer, you're incorporating in Delaware, you're incorporating a C Corp, right? You're doing stuff. By the time you leave the program, you've built your company. You have the foundation. We're bringing in mentors each week, so these people are going to hear you pitch, give you feedback, help you refine how you talk about your business. They're going to present from their own stories, their own lessons in the trenches when they were building and growing their company. And then you also have working groups. So congrats to your CEO, but we all sort of, myself included, when we do our own projects, our own businesses, the blinders inherently go on, right? And so you need help being held to our own goals as human beings, right? And so we put you in a working group that basically simulates a board of directors, and so helps you keep accountable to your own goals.
What stage startups are kind of ideal for Founders Institute? Is this idea stage, somewhat established, or already established? Where in the spectrum would a startup fall?
Yeah, good question. So we'll do everything pre-seed, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you could be as early as I have an idea, maybe I have a few ideas, right? And then you'll go on our basic track. And then I've had founders come in with $300,000 in revenue, but they want the mentorship, they want the feedback. They want to learn how to build a globally scalable business, not just a mom and pop or local business, and so they've enjoyed it as well. So really, everyone in that that pre-seed, I have an idea, I already have a product, I maybe even have some revenue, but I haven't fundraised a ton of money yet. Everyone in there, we can help.
What would be some startups, because I know, Buffalo's still kind of on the infancy of things. What would be some startups people might recognize have successfully gone through Founders Institute, not just in New York City, but around the world?
Yeah, sure. So we have Udacity, which is a great company. Kindara is a female fertility tracking app that a lot of women may know. They actually just sold. PathGather is a learning management system in New York that just got acquired. In Europe, we have a company called Peerby, which is a neighbors sharing sort of P2P thing. And then in Singapore, we have iCars Club. We have a few unicorns in the portfolio, but we've helped start about 3,000 companies now. So,
Wow.
There's a lot in there, and many of them I'm sure people have seen Sworkin on Shark Tank, and a few others. So,
3,000 is not a small number. When you went through Founders Institute, when you did and kind of took on the role as managing director, did you ever expect the scale of which you'd have an impact would be so big?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my goal, right? So I love that you brought up the firefighter thing, because not many people ever ask me about that. But my mission has always kind of been to help people. And I used to help people by going to their house, right? I was an EMT, get in the ambulance, maybe I'm doing CPR. We're saving a life one at a time, right? And so I kind of always wanted to, like, well, how do I help more people, right? And so I think we're alive at an unprecedented time. No other generation has had the internet, right? And we can use it, right? And so I feel that the intelligent people should use it and to their advantage, right? And so how can I help more people? Well, I can help. I could start a company. And then maybe I'll have some users and I can help those users. But I took a step back and I was like, how can I help the most amount of people? So I actually have a core mission to myself, and that is help founders improve the lives of 1 billion people. That's like, before I die, that's my goal. And so I figured if I go a level up to the venture capital investment side, I can have a bigger impact, right? Butterfly effect, right? And I can help founders improve the lives of 1 billion people. And so that's what I've been doing. And I love the scale of it. I love the way that we're building the company as Founder Institute. I love how things can be globally scalable in the world we live in right now, and I'm drawn to it, I guess.
Do you have a counter in your office of number of people you've impacted? Are you are you actively tracking the metrics there?
It's funny. I would like to. I don't know how I would track it yet. But one day maybe I can have a tracker there.
It's one of those like holiday break projects, like figure that metric out, right? To follow that.
Yeah.
So Founders Institute Buffalo, you're getting a little bit of help from Founders Institute alumni, correct?
Yes. So Scott Wayman of Kangaroo Time is here in Buffalo. He graduated Founders Institute LA, and back probably 2 years ago now, me and Scott met at a Founders Institute event at our headquarters in Silicon Valley, and we just kind of connected. Scott's a great guy. Stayed in touch, and I mentioned I was from Buffalo. 6-7 months later on a phone call, and he's like, someone on my team is from Buffalo. They mentioned this 43 North thing. What do you know about it? And I said, well, funny you should ask. Brian Straka just gave me a platinum pass, which is like this investor pass that you could fast forward someone into a round or something. I was like, I like you. I like Kangaroo Time. I'll give you mine. So I gave it to Scott, and so you guys took a look at his application, and he ended up going through the rest of the rounds and winning $500,000, moving to Buffalo, moved his team. I think he moved here with 3. Now they're up to 10, and they hope to get 60 people in the next year. And so then they won the follow-on funding this year, and so Scott's done a great job, I think, and you're here, you can probably attest to it more, but plugging into the local ecosystem and
for sure,
and is eager to give back, right? And so. And he's been through Founder Institute, and so we know it works. We know that Founder Institute creates companies at this pre-seed stage, right? Programs like 43 North, Z80 Labs, right, are looking for investment deal flow for companies that are a little bit established, right? And so the thesis basically is like, we know this works. We know FI can make companies. 43 North can take them if they obviously win, right? And then great companies can be built in Buffalo. So let's create more local companies. And I think that's where Buffalo has maybe a need right now, right? And that's what's great about Founder Institute is we don't just sort of shuffle the already existing companies. We help people get off the sidelines and get going and start fresh new companies.
So companies looking to join FI, there is a cost involved, correct? And can I break down why that is and why it is, why it's needed?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's just under $1,000 right now, and it's a little bit cheaper if you do the early deadline. And up until the early deadline, we have fellowships and scholarships available. The reason we do the cost, I mean, obviously these programs cost money to run, right? So, food and time and energy, right? So that's one, supports the program. But another thing, we charge a different price in every city, actually. So in New York, that's actually, I think, closer to $2,000. Buffalo's cheaper. And the reason we do that is the price is it's kind of a gate, right? Yep. And so it ensures that people that are going to do the work are join the program, right? And so what we've actually seen, and we still give fellowships when we always will. We give them to veterans. We give them to, we have a partnership with Girls in Tech, and we have a space fellowship, and we'll always do that. But what we've seen is the people that get stuff for free don't take it as seriously. They maybe don't complete their assignments, so they're like, oh, I'm just doing this thing, and then they just don't do the work. And then that's not what entrepreneurship is. Like, it's not about getting a certificate at the end.
Right.
That does not matter. It's about you building the weekly habits to be an entrepreneur and build a company for the next 15, 20 years, right? And so it serves that purpose a little bit up front as well.
It's just like anything. If it's free, sure, it's easy to sign up, but are you really going to take that extra effort to go, right?
Yeah, and we do free events, all the time leading up to it too. So like here in Buffalo tonight, we have a free event as well. So anyone in the city can come join those as well and still get that those lessons. So
I wouldn't be doing my job if I also didn't mention you are a fellow podcast host with Ambition Today, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I host a podcast. So I was saying earlier, this is amazing to be on this side of the table and just enjoy it. So thank you for having me.
How did Ambition Today start? And if for those who don't listen to the show, give us a little insight of what you're looking to do with it.
Yeah. So through running Founder Institute, every week I bring in amazing mentors. David Rose started New York Angels. Back in the day, Scott Hefferman's the founder of Meetup.com. Charlie Kim from Next Jump. There's all these great CEOs, and they'd come in every week for our sessions, and they'd share their story, and then that was it. It's a private session, closed doors, and so for some of them that were open to sharing that story more publicly, I wanted to capture them and share that story. So I started the podcast. I had no idea what I was doing when I started this podcast. The first episode is just like me and my friend talking, and we're like, I got the mics. I finally bought the mics. Like, let's just record something. And then, the next episode has a script, and the third one has a logo. And so I actually just a year ago went back and I put a prelude to the podcast as like below episode one. And it was like, listen, as with all things in this world, they start somewhere, right? Yeah. If you want to listen to episode 1 to see how things mature, grow, evolve over time, as businesses do, go for it. But if you want to listen to a good episode,
something that I'm proud of. Come
to the most recent one. Yeah, exactly.
I've done 85. You'll be the 85th episode, and I think, and this is not a shot at anyone who's below episode 50, but it's really these last like 30. I'm like, oh, these are starting to get good.
Yeah.
Or decent, at least.
Yeah.
I never want to toot my own horn. So how can people listen to that?
Yeah. So
which is a trick question because I know. But
everywhere podcasts are found. We're in
Spotify.
Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio.
Literally everywhere.
Everywhere podcasts are found.
Just like any good analytic guy.
Yeah. Ambition Today. Check it out.
All right. Well, one question I wanted to leave you with, given how, Founders Institute's bringing very early stage companies through their program, I wanted to get some insight from you. What are some of the common mistakes you're seeing from young entrepreneurs, and kind of give us like a quick lesson in what to avoid?
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. I'm putting you on the spot.
What time is it?
How much time do we have? So
here's how I would summarize it, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so it makes it very hard when you're uneducated in anything new, whether it's startups or bowling or whatever, right? To ask the right questions. And so in order to learn, you have to ask the right questions. And so honestly, that's the cause of the biggest mistake. And so like, give you an example. I do free events in New York every month, right? I could literally do an event called How to Get Free Customers, right? If I have 100 people sign up to go to this event, it's a free event. Maybe like 30 would show up, right? Mm-hmm. That's like the ratio. I could do another event that says, fundraising, how to fundraise for your company, right? And I'd have 100 people sign up, and I'd have like 85 show up, right? And the reason I make that point is like, you don't need funding. Like every founder's like, oh, I need a technical co-founder and I need funding. And like, they're just not asking the right questions. It's like, no, you need to find something people will pay for. You need to build some version of that you can test, right? And I don't care if it's a piece of pencil and paper, and like on the front end, it's, a Squarespace website. It looks beautiful. And then on the back end, you're hustling. You're being scrappy as hell. That's what I want to see, right? And too many people sit around and wait. Like, oh, I just need this one more thing, or it's not ready yet, or you just need to push forward and just, build a business, not look for fundraising or all those things can be helpful, right? But you're not going to get them that early anyway. They're a distraction, right? And so my advice would be spend time with other experienced entrepreneurs that can teach you and show you the ropes and help you eliminate the distractions, because there are many out there, many of them laid out by the VCs themselves, right? And just build a great business.
That's one of those universal, just start plugging away and doing it and not let perfection get in the way. Like I deal with that all the time when I'm talking to folks about content and storytelling. It's just like, well, I can't publish this video because it's, I need this. It's like,
proud parent syndrome. Yeah.
Trust me, you don't. Like just get it out there and then get another one out there and another one. Like especially in the content space where I'm comfortable in, it's a volume game, and especially in this world of where media is so digestible and forgotten about. I mean, this podcast, and it's been a great one, will be forgotten about in about 3 weeks by most listeners. So just plug away, and I think that's one of those like you said, universal lessons that apply in pretty much every industry.
Yeah, and I think plug yourself in. I mean, there's so many ways, like we talked about earlier, right? Like follow the right people on Twitter, subscribe to the right blog posts, read what the VCs are sharing. This is an industry that you could plug into from probably anywhere in the country, and really get to know who the key players are globally. And so it's an amazing time, and you just need to ask the right questions.
What are the kind of the tech spaces you're seeing that have the biggest potential moving forward in the next few years? Obviously AI and machine learning, those are the popular ones, but they're also pretty ambiguous and vague. But so what do
so ambiguous is the way I would explain this. So we're seeing mobile end. And this is actually really exciting. As of what day did I come here? I came here on Saturday. As of Friday, 50% of the world population is online.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And to put that in perspective, that's 3.9 billion people out of the 7.5 alive. In 2010, 2 billion people were online. So in 8 years, we've doubled the size of people on the internet from 2 billion people signed up. Mm-hmm. And then what's driving that is mobile, right? And so for most people, the first time they're experiencing the internet is on a cell phone.
Right.
They never had dial-up or...
They don't know the struggles we had as kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang up the phone, Mom.
Yeah. Trying to download Game Boy games, run an emulator.
My kids will never understand that struggle.
Yeah. LimeWire and some songs over here. What was the first song you ever downloaded?
Mine was on Napster. It was
Napster.
The Doors. What the heck is the name of the song? Riders in the Storm.
Nice. The first song for me was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song. It's the first song I ever downloaded on Napster.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to this. So my point here, mobile has been driving this insane growth of the internet. It's slowing down. I shouldn't say it's ending, right? But VCs and anyone that wants an astronomical return on investment needs to ride a wave that is, growing. And so for the first time ever, cell phone sales stayed the same. And for the first time ever, growth is slowing in the mobile space. So VCs are kind of in this weird place where they're like, well, we took all this money from institutional funds and pension funds to, so now where do we put it? And so you're starting to see this new wave essentially ascend, right? And so I think there's a few things that are interesting. I'm super bullish on blockchain. I love blockchain. Machine learning, AI is great. I think of blockchain and machine learning, AI as horizontals, meaning that like they can be layered onto any kind of business, right? But then you're also seeing, some verticals take off, right? Like quantum computing is actually, I haven't even heard people in New York talking about quantum computing yet, but everyone in the Valley is talking about quantum computing, which is like a big push on physics, and it's really hard to do. But if you could pull that off, that'll be big. So we're at the start of a new wave. Obviously we've seen a lot of meal kit companies get funded. Biotech is honestly really starting to blow up around the country, and that's great for Buffalo as well, because Buffalo is well positioned for that with UB. It's an exciting time, and I like when there's sort of a reset and a new wave, because the people that are just sort of like playing in the space will kind of die off, and that leaves room for people that are playing the long game and established here to really win.
So for folks who want to learn more about Founders Institute Buffalo, how can they do so?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about Founders Institute Buffalo, you can go to fi.co, check out our website. You can apply on there. If you have any questions about it, I've never done this, but I'll do this. Feel free to email me, just kevin@fi.co, or you can tweet me, or you can reach out to me, Scott, Lauren, Cody. Anyone here is really happy to help or answer any questions you have.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming back to Buffalo, bringing Founders Institute with you, and joining us on the podcast this week.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited, and I love what you guys are doing with 43 North. I got to judge it this year. It was an amazing experience, and I'm really excited for the region overall.
It's exciting times ahead, so we're lucky everyone's starting to hop on board and be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you, Nate.
Cheers. I want to thank Kevin for joining me on the show this week. If you want to learn more about the Founder Institute, please head over to fi.co. That's fi.co, and learn how you can participate in the Buffalo branch of the Founder Institute. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show this week and every week. We've had some of the biggest weeks in the last month and a half of the podcast, and I just want to thank all of the listeners from the bottom of my heart. It's great to see progress of this podcast. And actually, October and November were our biggest months ever. Can December beat it? Well, that's up to you. Why don't you share this show with friends, colleagues, or other founders, entrepreneurs, startup gurus, whoever might be interested in this show. Make sure you head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. And did you know that you can listen to this on your smart speaker as well? Just ask your smart speaker to play the latest episode of Latitude, the 43 North podcast. Thank you again for listening. For 43 North, I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one.